multiple Trump accusers, Larry Noble, former general counsel at the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, which is central here now, and Samantha Holvey, 2006 Miss USA contestant, who says Trump had inspected the women for the pageant, making them feel like, quote, sexual objects. Good to have all of you back with me on the show. Gloria, let me start with you with this report you just saw. Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels' stories sound a lot alike, and frankly, some rather unsettling ways. Does that make them more or less believable to you?
Well, I find both of them to be very, very credible, Aaron. But there are stark differences, of course. While both appeared to be consensual, it's interesting that Karen McDougal suggests that there was a romantic relationship, that they said they loved each other. And she had nothing negative at all to say about President Trump. On the other hand, in reference to Stormy Daniels, that appeared to be sex in the context of and after then Donald Trump indicated a question that, of course, he was the host of The Apprentice at that time, and asked her if she might be interested in being on The Apprentice. After that, sex took place. Later, there were discussions about whether or not she would be on The Apprentice. She met him one more time, although there was no sex. And he didn't have a decision for her yet about The Apprentice. So I ask, potentially that's a quid pro quo sexual harassment claim she might have had then, doesn't have now because it's too late.
Right.
But that's interesting.
Yeah, and of course, you know, and obviously a lot of the similarities in terms of how he compared them to his daughter favorably and told them what he told them about his wife and their separate bedrooms. I mean, certainly the stories echo each other very clearly in many ways. You know, Sam, both of the women that we just heard say they have been subjected to intimidation and threats. Let me just play Stormy Daniels again.
I was in a parking lot going to a fitness class with my infant daughter. I was taking, you know, the seats facing backwards in the back seat, diaper bag, you know, getting all the stuff out. And a guy walked up on me and said to me, "Leave Trump alone, forget the story." And then he leaned around and looked at my daughter and said, "A beautiful little girl, it'd be a shame if something happened to her mom." And then he was gone.
You took it as a direct threat?
Absolutely.
Sam, Trump advisor Ed McMullen during the campaign called you and other accusers of the president bimbos. You know, you've been subjected to some of this as well. What stands out from these interviews, from Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, to you?
To me, especially just how the president and his camp continues to call not just them, but all of us liars. And just because he calls us liars several times does not make us liars, especially in my case. I'm simply confirming audio of him talking about going backstage and checking out the Miss USA contestants in the dressing room. So, you know, how can you call me a liar when I'm confirming your own words? And I think that clearly gets rid of, you know, any validation that he could have that he ever tells the truth.
You know, Larry, it's interesting here on this issue of telling the truth, right? The president's deputy press secretary today used the word believe. The president doesn't believe Stormy Daniels, which, as I said, I found an absurd word to choose, right? Right? Either, you know, he knows, right? So you can either call her a liar or don't call her a liar, but believe is absurd and perhaps says more than a lot of other words would. The fact that they didn't want to go farther than that. Stormy Daniels tonight says she's suing the man who paid her the money to be quiet, Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. She's suing him for defamation. What happens next here, Larry, that moves the needle?
Well, this is interesting because the defamation suits really avoid some problems such as the statute of limitations with a sexual harassment claim. And what they're trying to do here is get it outside the arbitration agreement and basically bring it into court where the question will be whether or not Michael Cohen lied about Stormy Daniels and knew it was a lie or recklessly disregarded the fact that it was a lie. If this case goes forward, and I'm sure there will be motions to dismiss, the Trump campaign will file motions to dismiss and then try to appeal whatever happens, and they're going to try to delay as long as possible. But if this case does go forward, then there's discovery. And with discovery, Stormy Daniels can take Michael Cohen's deposition, might arguably be able to take other depositions, possibly of the president. Now, he's not named in this case, but he might be considered a witness to what happened. And it really does present the White House with some real problems. You know, it's one thing to be able to say whatever you want to say on the campaign trail, you know, and be factually, a challenge on the campaign trail. But when you get into a court and when you get, when you get put under oath, as President Clinton found out, it becomes very important what you say and that it's true. And so I think this moves it into a whole different field.
It certainly does. I mean, Gloria, the White House said today there's nothing to corroborate Daniels' claim, and her lawyer has suggested otherwise again and again and again, right? He put out that picture of a DVD or a CD, something that, he seemed to imply there's something on it, pictures. And here's what he said just today. So after the whole interview aired on 60 Minutes, here's what he said today.
We have a whole host of evidence. This is not going away. There's going to be a lot of evidence that's going to come to light in the coming weeks and months. She can describe his genitalia. She can describe various conversations that they had that leave no doubt as to whether this woman is telling the truth.
Gloria, at what point should Daniels' lawyer put the evidence out or look like he's crying wolf?
Well, he has been battling in the court of public opinion, so there are no standards there in the court of public opinion, although there are ethical limitations on lawyers in reference to talking about evidence that may be in a case. So depending on where this is litigated, those ethical guidelines for lawyers are going to have to be adhered to. Stormy Daniels' testimony, of course, is evidence, but it can be weighed by the trier of fact. In addition to that, as to that DVD that he said or suggested that contained evidence, all of the evidence, documentary recordings, emails, texts, according to the settlement agreement that she signed, if it is valid, then they were to have destroyed all of the evidence or turned it over and not have been permitted to preserve or keep any evidence.
Right, which I guess could be a question, although her talking about it anyway, they say is a $20 million violation, which I know you and others say is excessive if it were to even be enforced. Sam, when you see all of this, and you and I have talked about this before, you spoke out early, you have come out and spoken out again, and you've done so despite people saying nasty things about you, trying to intimidate you, and you've been unafraid. Is that how you're going to continue? Are you afraid or scared at all when you look at this pattern of intimidation that's clearly out there?
It's not always easy to do what's right, but it is always necessary. And sometimes it does get kind of scary for me. I'll be honest with you, but I have a great support system, and I'm very there are a lot of women that have gone before me that have done a lot tougher things than this. So I think it's important that I keep fighting and standing up for the women of our country.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sam, for doing that and for doing that with us. And thanks very much, Gloria and Larry, for being with me as well.